In the scorching California desert, a rusted behemoth lingers. Abandoned, once built to take on the legendary Big Boy but now nearly erased from history. Southern Pacific's AC-9 was engineered to conquer mountains and tunnels no other locomotive dared face. Almost no one remembers it survived into modern times, let alone why it was left to decay while its famous rival became a museum icon. What doomed this innovative giant to abandonment? And what does its disappearance reveal about how we choose which parts of our past are worth preserving? Union Pacific's Big Boy stands as the gold standard of American steam. For decades, its name has meant one thing: the biggest, the strongest, the unbeatable. Built between 1941 and 1944, 25 locomotives were engineered to haul enormous trains over the long, steady climbs of the Wasatch Mountains. Each weighed in at over 1.2 million pounds with tender attached stretching nearly 133 feet from coupler to coupler. The Big Boy's 488 four-wheel arrangement became a symbol of brute force with a drawbar horsepower rating over 6,000 and the ability to move freight at speeds up to 80 miles per hour. But it is not just the numbers that keep Big Boy in the spotlight. 8 of these giants survive today, displayed in cities from Cheyenne to Dallas, Omaha to St. Louis. Their presence in major museums, surrounded by interpretive displays and crowds of visitors, has cemented Big Boy's place in the collective memory. Model train companies churn out replicas, coffee table books celebrate their engineering, and every few years the restoration or movement of a Big Boy makes national news. For many, the Big Boy is not just a locomotive. It is the face of American railroading's golden age. This focus on the largest and the loudest shapes how railroad history gets remembered. While the Big Boy is preserved and celebrated, other machines, sometimes just as ambitious, but built for different challenges, fade into the background. The yardstick has always been size, power, and fame. Anything less risks slipping away, no matter how innovative or essential it might have been. Southern Pacific's answer to the Big Boy wasn't just another giant on rails. In 1939, the Lima Locomotive Works delivered a dozen machines that would stand apart in both form and function, the AC-9 class. Each one stretched nearly 120 feet and tipped the scales at almost 1 million pounds with tender attached. Their 288 four-wheel arrangement, with 2 leading wheels, 2 sets of 8 driving wheels, and a 4-wheel trailing truck, gave them a low, powerful stance, ready to tackle the steepest climbs and heaviest trains the West could offer. What truly set the AC-9 apart was its streamlined skyline casing, a sheet metal shroud that ran the length of the boiler. This feature, rare among American steam locomotives, gave the AC-9 a sleek, almost futuristic profile, more at home in a science fiction serial than a freight yard. Underneath that casing, the engine's design emphasized both brute strength and a kind of grace, blending raw mechanics with a hint of style. Only 12 AC-9 locomotives ever existed, making them one of the rarest classes of large steam in North America. Lima's craftsmen built each unit to Southern Pacific's demanding specifications, creating a locomotive that was as much a product of its environment as of its era. While the Big Boy was built for long, steady climbs in open country, the AC-9 was engineered for the unpredictable, rugged mountain grades of the West. In a world obsessed with the biggest, the AC-9 was proof that sometimes the most remarkable machines are the ones designed to solve problems no one else could face. Smoke could turn a mountain tunnel into a death trap. On the Southern Pacific's Sierra Nevada routes, mile-long tunnels and timber snowsheds trapped locomotive exhaust, filling the air with choking fumes. Crews described the sensation as drowning on dry land, eyes burning, lungs clawing for air, the cab disappearing into a haze of soot. In the early 1920s, a suffocation incident in Summit Tunnel left engineers unconscious and nearly cost lives, pushing Southern Pacific to demand a radical solution from their builders. Letters from firemen and engineers pleaded for relief, recounting nights spent coughing up black phlegm or collapsing at the throttle as the train crawled through another tunnel. The answer was a design almost unheard of in American steam. Move the cab to the very front, ahead of the boiler, so crews could breathe clean air. This cab-forward arrangement became a lifeline, not just a novelty. It let engineers see daylight at the end of the tunnel and live to reach it. Each run through Donner Pass became survivable, not just possible. Human lives were preserved by engineering that put survival ahead of tradition. The AC-9's lineage grew from this necessity, even if its own cab sat at the rear. Its siblings, the true cab-forwards, stood as proof that innovation could mean the difference between routine and tragedy. On the Southern Pacific, design was never just about power. It was about keeping men alive when the mountain closed in. On a winter morning in 1940, the Southern Pacific AC-9 thundered up the slopes of Donner Pass, its skyline casing gleaming beneath a layer of soot. Freight cars stretched behind it, each one loaded with the raw materials that kept the West alive: lumber, ore, produce, bound for distant cities. The AC-9 had 12 driving axles that clawed at the rails, pushing nearly 1 million pounds of steel and cargo over the mountain's relentless grade. Crews learned to trust the engine's strength. It could keep a heavy train moving at 25 miles per hour, even as the snow piled deep and the wind howled through the pines. Unlike the cab-forward designs that battled smoke in tunnels, the AC-9's conventional cab sat at the rear, but its power was every bit as real. Southern Pacific historian Gene Daimling describes the AC-9 as a workhorse built for adversity. Assigned to the Modoc line in the 1950s, these engines faced some of the harshest conditions in American railroading: long, isolated stretches between Sparks and Alturas, where a breakdown could mean hours stranded in the high desert. The AC-9 locomotives were up to the challenge. On the steepest grades, they could move tonnage that would have stalled lesser engines. Their two 8-8 four-wheel arrangements spread weight across the rails for maximum traction. Originally coal burners, the AC-9 locomotives underwent a major conversion in 1950. Southern Pacific converted all 12 to oil, a move driven by changing fuel supplies and the need for cleaner, more efficient operation. Crews noticed the difference immediately. Oil-fired engines were easier to fire, produced less ash, and could be refueled faster, shaving precious minutes from tight schedules. The conversion also allowed the AC-9 locomotives to keep pace with the evolving demands of the railroad, even as diesel locomotives began to appear on the horizon. For nearly 2 decades, the AC-9 locomotives earned a reputation for reliability and brute force. They were the engines called upon when nothing else would do, when the snow was deep, the train was heavy, and the mountain refused to yield. Their presence on the Modoc and Donner lines was a testament to the power of design meeting necessity, a reminder that sometimes the most important machines are the ones that simply get the job done. By the mid-1950s, the Southern Pacific Board faced a stark reality. The numbers behind steam operation no longer added up. Diesel locomotives, rapidly replacing steam across American railroads, offered a clear economic advantage: lower fuel costs, fewer crew members, and far less time spent in the shop. Internal cost analyses from that period compared the expense of keeping the AC-9s running, labor, fuel oil, specialized parts, and constant maintenance, against the streamlined efficiency of new diesel units. The difference was impossible to ignore. In 1956, a directive from Southern Pacific headquarters formalized the end. The order listed every remaining steam locomotive, including the entire AC-9 class, for immediate retirement and disposal. Official retirement lists from that year show all 12 AC-9s marked for scrap, their service lives cut short, not by mechanical failure, but by a boardroom calculation. The scrap value of nearly 1,000,000 pounds of steel and iron per locomotive made the decision even easier to justify. Every ton salvaged fed the post-war economy, while the railroad trimmed costs and modernized its image. Any hope for preservation faded in the face of these numbers. Mechanical department staff and union representatives occasionally lobbied to save at least one example, either a true cab forward or an AC9, but their requests never made it past the Finance Committee. Board memos cited prohibitive storage costs, a lack of suitable museum partners, and the logistical nightmare of moving such a massive engine off the main line. Even as rail historians in California raised the alarm, the company's priority was clear: eliminate steam, standardize the fleet, and maximize returns from the scrap market. By the time the last AC9 steamed into the yard in early summer of 1956, its fate was sealed not by engineering limits, but by the relentless logic of modernization. The era of the steam giant was over, and with it, the chance to save a machine built for a different kind of railroad. Rumors began to circulate not long after the last AC9 vanished from Southern Pacific's roster. In railfan circles and on early online forums, whispers grew about a survivor, a hulking frame half buried in sand somewhere beyond the reach of official records. Some said they had seen it while driving remote county roads. Others pointed to grainy photographs or to retired railroaders who remembered one that never made it to the torch. Yet every official document tells a different story. Southern Pacific's own retirement lists, scrap manifests from 1956, and builder records from Lima Locomotive Works all agree. 12 AC9 locomotives were built, 12 were retired, and 12 were scrapped. No exceptions. Records show the same conclusion. The inspection cards and maintenance logs end abruptly in the summer of 1956. The California State Railroad Museum archives hold no trace of a transfer or donation. County property records in Modoc and Inyo list no locomotive left behind. For every claim of a desert hulk, there is a paper trail insisting nothing survived. The weight of the evidence is heavy. Rail historian Gene Daimling has spent years sorting fact from fantasy. He has pored over land use maps, salvage contracts, and oral histories, looking for even a hint of a missing engine. He says he has chased every lead, and that every time someone posts a sighting, he checks it against the records. So far, there is just no evidence. The work of the historian has found nothing to support the sightings. Still, the legend refuses to die. Urban explorers post coordinates for supposed wrecks, and rail fans debate the possibility that a single AC9 escaped the scrapper's torch, perhaps abandoned after a failed salvage deal, or left when a company went bankrupt and a carcass was stranded on private land. The lack of closure keeps the story alive, and the debate fuels the legend. With no verified photographs, no serial numbers, and no physical remains, the AC9's supposed survival has become a kind of modern ghost story, a mystery that draws anyone who wants to believe that not every giant was lost to the cutting torch. The idea feels like a ghost, haunting roadside conversations and message boards. The question lingers in the dry air. Could something so massive really vanish without a trace? The only way to know is to go looking, search for the answer, and see what the desert will reveal. Steel left to the desert does not keep its secrets for long. If a Southern Pacific AC9 ever did escape the scrapper's torch, its remains would bear the scars of decades without shelter or care. The boiler shell, once gleaming beneath a streamlined casing, would now be pitted and flaking, eaten away by sun, wind, and sand. Rust would have spread in thick, scaly patches across every surface, working deep into seams and rivets. The firebox, where coal or oil once roared, would be a collapsed cavity, its stay bolts snapped, its sheets warped and brittle. Any brass or bronze fittings, from gauges to whistles, would have vanished long ago, stripped by scavengers or claimed by the elements. The running gear, if still attached, would sit half buried in drifts of sand, the drivers locked in place by corrosion. Wheel faces would show deep pitting and cracks, a sign of years spent without movement or maintenance. The cab, once filled with controls and dials, would be gutted, glass gone, wood rotted, paint blistered by relentless heat. Even the tender, if present at all, would be nothing more than a rusted shell, its tanks leaking residues into the dry earth. Any attempt at rescue faces obstacles as daunting as the desert itself. Moving a 300-ton relic from a remote site demands heavy cranes, disassembly, and specialized transport, costing upwards of $2 million before restoration even begins. Environmental hazards complicate matters. Asbestos insulation, lead paint, and oil-soaked soils turn salvage into a regulated hazardous operation. To restore a derelict AC-9 to static display would require at least $500,000. To bring it back to life would cost more than $10 million. With no spare parts and no surviving blueprints for many components, even the most ambitious preservationist would be forced to rebuild nearly everything from scratch. The desert does not forgive, and it does not forget. What remains, if anything, is less a machine than a memory, locked in rust and silence. 8 big boys, each one a colossus of steel and steam, stand today in carefully curated museum halls and city parks. Their sheer presence draws crowds year after year, funded by public donations and corporate grants, shielded from the elements by canopies and restoration crews. School children climb their stairs. Modelers measure every rivet. The story of the big boy is retold in documentaries, commemorative coins, and glossy railroad calendars. Its status, as the largest ever, has become a kind of passport to immortality. But the Southern Pacific AC-9, built for a different kind of greatness, has no such afterlife. Not a single example remains, not in a museum, not on a siding, not even as a rusted hulk behind a fence. 12 were built. None were saved. The difference is not just a matter of luck or timing. It is a reflection of how preservation decisions get made, who decides what is worth saving, and why. Union Pacific's leadership saw the big boy as a symbol, something to rally public support and corporate pride. Their preservation program was deliberate, shaped by a sense of legacy and a willingness to spend money on spectacle. Southern Pacific, facing different pressures, made a different choice. For them, the AC-9 was a tool, not a trophy. When the era of steam ended, so did any thought of keeping one around. Museums, already stretched thin, gravitated toward engines that promised headlines and visitor numbers. Public funding followed the familiar, the famous, the easy to explain. In the end, the AC-9's innovation counted for less than the big boy's bulk. The result is a permanent gap, a reminder that collective memory is not shaped by what mattered most, but by what was easiest to celebrate. 8 big boys endure. 0 AC-9s remain. The question lingers, what else have we chosen to forget? Today, not a single Southern Pacific AC-9 survives in a museum. Every trace of this innovation has been left to rust or rumor. Preservation still favors the biggest, not the most ingenious. We risk losing tomorrow's breakthroughs to the same neglect. History does not just forget what is not saved. It forgets what is not valued, what other stories are fading before we notice they are gone. Share your thoughts below.